The doctrine under Mao was that you didn't even own the teeth in your head. Okay, they all belong to the collective. Okay, that's the
Oh,
abolition of private property, dog. Are you familiar with how China actually reformed? Like how it went from Maoism to capitalism? Everybody kind of knows
no.
that China became rich. You don't know? Okay. So this is one of the most important stories to know, and there's actually, there's a lot of denunciation of China, and, some of that is merited and whatnot. Certainly, I can be critical of it as well. But it's worth also understanding what they did right and how they leveled up. How did they go from this agrarian communist state where people were literally eating each other and, to this basically the number two, maybe number one world power on some dimensions. And essentially, so the story goes, Deng Xiao Ping had recently just taken power from Mao, and around that time, a bunch of farmers in, I believe, Zhejiang province, and please excuse my pronunciation on this because I might be, I certainly wouldn't call myself an expert on Chinese pronunciation, but a bunch of farmers in Zhejiang province, basically, they got together and they signed a secret contract which said that, yes, they're on a collective farm, but each of them gets to keep some share of the grain that they're growing, right? They don't have to give it all to the collective, right? Now, what this contract included were provisions for them to provide for each other's next of kin if they were executed. Do you know why?
Because that was an illegal contract, I assume.
Because capitalism was punishable by death
Yeah.
in China within human memory about 40 something years ago. Okay,
So,
like
yeah.
you could be shot in the head for entrepreneurship. I mean, that's insane. Okay,
Yeah.
that is like to truly take on board. I'm just saying that, but to truly understand what communism was, we haven't really seen the movies on what this really meant, right? This insane system where the things we totally take for granted, like the right to start your own business, the right to change a job, right? The right to buy and sell what you want, like enormous areas of human freedom, not just those economic areas, but when you restrict all of those other areas, you have to lie about everything, right? You have to lie about how much grain was created. You have to lie that you didn't shoot the peasants who didn't create the grain. You have to you just fake all these statistics. The entire system, because they denied that, that necessary evil and not even evil of profit, it just got all twisted into knots. Okay,
Yeah.
so essentially, the secret document that transferred from China is just like an article-length version of this. I mean, the doctrine under Mao was that you didn't even own the teeth in your head. Okay, they all belong to the collective. Okay, that's the
Oh,
abolition of private property, dog.
yeah.
That's what that actually means. Guys with guns coming and taking your farm and sending you to a slave labor camp, right? And so Deng was actually purged 3 times. He kind of came back, and there was an editorial that said he's okay, and then he got purged again, and his son was thrown through a window and was put in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So, I mean, things were crazy there. So how did Deng turn it around? Well, first he managed to outmaneuver Mao's widow when she passed away. Not sorry, when he passed away, the so-called Gang of Four. And there's a whole set of machinations that took place in the mid-70s on this. But second, he saw what was happening in places like Zhejiang, and he basically called off the dogs. Once he took power, he said, don't kill them. Those farmers may have the right idea. See, Deng had been attacked for many years as being a secret capitalist roader. Do you know what that term refers to?
No.
It's someone who wants to take the capitalist road, a reactionary running dog of the West who thinks that capitalism has some merit to it.
Yeah.
That all capitalists aren't top hat, greedy people who are out to exploit China and should be executed. What's interesting, by the way, is if you take a lot of the rhetoric of that time and sort of map it to like the woke rhetoric in the US, you sort of see like the same level of just extremism in every single word or paragraph is there, right? The X and the Y and Z. It's lineally related, at like two languages that are related at the root, and even if the inflections are different, the umlauts are moved around a little bit, So what happened with Deng is he called off the dogs here and fundamentally he realized he couldn't flip the entire country from communist to capitalist overnight. That's a difference between sort of a market reform versus a communist reform. With a communist reform, all the flags change. There's a huge declaration, we communists now, and there's a glorious new anthem and a glorious new this, glorious new that. Everything changes. It's often year zero, this disjunctive change, right? That's what kind of that communist revolution looks like. The left of center revolution often looks like that. The market revolution was continuous. He didn't change any symbols. In fact, he kept it as continuous as possible. He didn't make a grand announcement because that would have caused backlash. Instead, what he said was, okay, I'm going to take the political capital I have, and I've observed that Hong Kong is working, that Taiwan is working, unfortunately, because for them, Taiwan had basically grown to almost the GDP of mainland China at that time, simply by practicing capitalism. And Singapore is working. And so he had meetings with Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, and basically used his political capital to allow for a special economic zone across the causeway from Hong Kong. One zone literally fenced off, by the way, okay, where the Chinese people were allowed to be capitalist. And so when Deng did Shenzhen, it just went vertical. It really worked. And then with that political capital, he was able to open up more special economic zones, like I think 3 or 4 more. And those were all just working. And then he just kind of did it for the Eastern Seaboard. And this became, like a policy tool for China, the so-called SEZ, right, Special Economic Zone. And that was exported across East Asia with some success, exported worldwide with less success. But the idea of having different rules for different areas and allowing people to kind of experiment with that's is our version of like a minimum viable product. That's our version of start small and scale up, right? Like localize the spend. In his case, it wasn't the expenditure of capital, but of political capital, because he had to like basically hold people off from trying to shoot him for reversing 30 years of gains in the great proletarian cultural revolution, blah, blah, blah. Go ahead.
So apply that back to what we're talking about with like Twitter and the tech companies today. How do you?
Yes.
How
Okay,
do they
great.
go
So
from
let's
where
pop
it's
all
centralized
the
to
way back.
decentralized? Yeah.
Absolutely. So the key thing was that Deng realized that if you allowed that farmer to take a cut of their grain, they would produce more. Duh, right? And it's the most obvious thing in the world, and so that led to this gigantic multi-trillion-dollar Chinese economy. If we allow people to take a cut of their digital labor, okay, if they can actually monetize for every tweet, for every post, for every action that they take online on these platforms where they currently own nothing, it will have a similar increase. Yeah. That's why this is such a big deal. Like literally, we're talking the economy of China level scale unlock in terms of digital property rights. When your property isn't just, when your teeth aren't owned by the state, right? Yeah. When you have true property rights and it's seizure resistant, digital property rights, when your following is yours, when you can monetize them, when you can take your homestead and then move it somewhere else, when all of that is cryptographic as opposed to essentially just a row in a table server side, you will see an unlock that is comparable to literally the economy of China.